What's up, everybody? It's Wednesday. What a glorious evening it is. Got my boys PK and Slick Dissonant here. The Great White
Let's
Brotherhood.
go.
Great Whiteboard Brotherhood, my bad. But, today's a great victory for white supremacy and racism. Allegedly. What is this? What is this shirt? What is this Trump don't serve?
Trump don't surf, y'all. So it apparently is from a movie called Apocalypse Now. And I don't know what year it was, and I've never seen the movie. But one of the quotes in there is like, Charlie don't surf. And so how it was explained to me one time is that basically people were like polluting the ocean and stuff like that, and I think Charlie might have been like one of them, or like, and they were eating the fish, killing the fish, something like that.
No, Charlie is the enemy.
Yeah, Charlie's the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Right. So Charlie don't surf just means like he doesn't get it, So I think that's what this shirt is in reference to. Even though I'm not saying Trump doesn't get it, I'm just saying I got this shirt because I sold a surfboard and the mother effer didn't have enough cash. So he's like, hey, you get $50 store credit. I'm like, all right. Or it might have been like it might have been 100 or something. He gave me a lot of store credit. It was BS. But anyway, one of the things I got was this shirt. And I kind of like it, and I wear it on special occasions like today.
And then Gabe just happened to wear a wave shirt. So there you go.
Got my Katsushi Kahokuzai tidal wave print. It's one of my favorite images. It's one of the earliest forms of Japanese print art, which they were ahead of the game on. And Katsushi Kahokuzai, one of my favorites.
Well, it's kind of a cool synchronicity, because what I have on my mind tonight to talk about is, it's got everything to do with that paradox of particle versus wave. What's really going on? Is our universe made of discrete, continuous, or discrete, discontinuous particles, or is it a big continuum, right? Which is it? Or is it some of both? That's what I'm thinking about. But I know you guys are pretty much in a constant and perpetual weave in our private super exclusive club that I can barely keep up with a fraction of. So I'm down to talk about whatever, but I'm definitely in the mood to talk about infinity and what we can and can't know about it, and how it makes a really good example of where the science trademark has gone wrong, so desperately wrong, is in looking at the question of infinity.
Yeah, man. These definitions, they're so many people think that they're satisfied and that you can say infinity and everything is established and we can move forward. But when you get into philosophy, you start realizing that there's strong nuance to your relationship to these terms of infinity and these claims of a nothing. Can I tell a quick story?
You bet, man.
Okay.
Just hanging.
All right, great. I love, in the last show, Chance, you were talking about developing your rhetoric, your oration skills. When I was a child, I was fortunate, I guess, in hindsight, to be in a competition, a state competition for speech. And I didn't know it when I started. It was basically in English class, everybody wrote a speech about their vision of tomorrow. It was a speech designed for an optimistic vision. And everybody writes their speech, everybody gives their presentation that week, and somehow I got the best one in my class. And then I went to a school competition from everybody in the school, and I got number one for the best speech in the school for my vision of the future. And then the teachers are telling me, guess what, you're going to regionals. And so I had to actually practice my speech even more. We rented a recording camera, old school, one of those old recording cameras. And I actually gave my speech on camera and played it back to watch myself. And if you think about it, we are in a unique generation where we could do that. You could record your own art and then critique yourself objectively to look back at yourself with some sort of fidelity to, self-reflection. So I got my speech honed down. I started doing hand gestures and the timing, that my hands do this when I'm saying that, until I could almost fall asleep on my words because my hands are telling my mind what to say. So I went to the state. Let's see. I went to regionals and I won, and then I got the camera and I made it even better. And then I went to the state competition. And fellas, the state competition, I didn't know this until I got there. It was at the SS Yorktown in Charleston, South Carolina. This is a hugely monumental location. It's a huge keystone artifact of culture, the SS Yorktown. I went on, I gave my speech, and some other guy, he got on, he did his speech right after me, and he gets up on the podium first, and he starts his speech out with, "First of all, I would like to be ever so gracious to the Optimist Club for giving all these youths the opportunity to come up and articulate our optimistic view." And he just sucks all the judges' dicks. And then he gives his speech and he wins. And I go home and I'm like, damn, why didn't I suck all the judges' dicks? But on the SS Yorktown, I have discovered a great amount of fascinating things. For one, the landing buoy from the space mission, from Apollo 13, whatever that is, that buoy, the dinghy that they dropped down in the ocean and pulled the astronauts out, it is in a museum on the SS Yorktown. It's immortalized there, and I think it moves around. It might be in other places too, but it was there when I went to give the speech, and I'm looking at this big Apollo landing pod. As I walk in, it was really intimidating. I just wanted to mention that. And then years later, I'm 38, and I'm obsessed with the concept of the zero. I've learned that it's not a number, that it's actually a symbol, and we use it as a space holder, and it's a fascinating enigma, the concept of a zero, and its history, in fact, and how people behave around incorporating the zero into their worldview. And I'm really fixed on this. It's like coming at me from everywhere. I'm walking down Pearl Street in my favorite bookshop. Right in the window, as I'm thinking about it in the moment, is a book called Zero, The Biography of a Dangerous Idea. And I stop in my tracks. I go right in the bookstore. I buy that book. And the opening line to the book is, "The SS Yorktown was dead in the water. It had been assassinated by a zero that was left in its code." It was such a great introduction to a book. Talk about hook them in the beginning and drag them into into this what many people would think was boring. Turns out the SS Yorktown had a zero left in its code, and all the computers shut down. They had to get the tugboats to bring them into shore. That is the seed of Y2K. That's where it all started. What happened to the SS Yorktown, this big, powerful implement, had been rendered impotent by just one tiny error. And it's such an enigmatic error. Like, it had to be a zero because the zero is the enigma of enigmas. And then it turns into Y2K, and everybody ate that mind virus up. What's wild is Y2K encodes 9/11. So yeah, I just thought I would drop some of those weaves on my adventure, my relationship to the zero, which is, it's kind of a pet name for me. Literally, it's my dog's name.
Yeah, buddy. It's cool that you bring that up because it's occurring to me that the word Zeno, with our good old friend, the obscure letter swap it into R, the rhoticism, it is Zeno and zero. And I wanted to talk about Zeno's paradoxes because I kind of stumbled into them the other day while I was doing some Platonism research. And PK, I asked PK's thoughts about Zeno's paradoxes, and he took a big steamer on them.
True.
But taking them at face value, I think that that's warranted because, and we'll talk about what they are, but I would like to kind of circle around them, pun intended, and see if there's other type of esoteric meaning we can pull out of it. But Zeno's paradoxes, led me to this book by Rene Guenon that also PK shared. And I got through most of that today, read it with a baby on my chest. It was great. Nothing more relaxing than a 2-week-old infant sleeping on your chest while you read some incredibly heady material. This book is called The Metaphysical Principles of the Infinitesimal Calculus.
Yeah, the title is even just like
Unbelievable.
What?
Yeah, so he's it's really just a big refutation of the idea of the infinitesimal calculus in mathematics, which is basically the idea that number increasing or decreasing perpetually without end, that is not equivalent to infinity. It's not the same thing. And we'll get into that. I think we should start with Zeno's paradoxes, but there's a whole chapter in this book. 0 is not a number. And since, there's not really a special order we need to go at this in, maybe we should just talk about 0 a little bit, because if infinity is kind of like the beginning and the end, 0 is kind of like the beginning of the end. And the indefinite decrease of numbers going down forever and ever, it can't end in a null number any more than the indefinite increase can have an infinite number. Because there's always, whatever number you land on, there's always one more you can add to it or one more unit you can take away from it. So infinity is no more a number than 0 is. They're both equally distant from whatever the unit of measurement is. There's a lot more reasons why the mathematical conception of infinity just does not actually work metaphysically that we can talk about.
Yeah, I liked Rene Guenon. I feel like summed it up so well with this. He was basically said, infinity is a metaphysical concept. And what you're trying to do when you math it is stepping out of the metaphysical into the physical. And he's like, that's not where it belongs. That, in a nutshell, from what I gathered, was kind of, because at the end, it's kind of a philosophical debate, but it is important, because and I liked how he said too, one of his main objections or that people could say is be like, oh, but the practical use, or like, calculus gives us so much this and that. And like, I don't know enough about it that, yeah, maybe you do, maybe in some computer programs or wherever you use calculus, need somehow to factor in there a symbol for infinity, because, that was one of the main arguments I felt like he said. Was like, people could be like, oh, but it's got practical use in science or whatever.
Yeah, that doesn't actually reflect reality. So it's important because it is a cornerstone to where we've gone wrong in modern science and physics. Mm-hmm. And it actually, what I like about this book is what he's really refuting, even though it might sound like he's just in a kind of very dry scholarly way about infinity versus indefinitude. It's really a refutation of atomism, which I think that's the value of this. So to preview, that's really why I wanted to bring this to the table, because I've kind of been on a refuting all kinds of steps on the scientific Tower of Babel streak lately. And I stumbled into this. And this is one that I really wanted to wrap my head around more, is atomism, because it's the base of the pyramid, right? Or the base of the Tower of Babel. And because these are things that cannot be seen with the eye, cannot be observed in nature, there's really nowhere else to tackle it other than in logic and in reason and mathematics. So
yeah, buddy,
this is a good book for that. The Metaphysical Principles of the Infinitesimal Calculus.
I love that you
type that into your browser.
I love that you said I stumbled into this. I already wrote it down. The gospel is foolishness to the Greeks and a stumbling block to the Jews. The stone that rolls away from the cave's entrance. How do you roll a stone so easy? Oh, it's in the shape of a 0. And in the timeline, did you guys know there's no such thing as the year 0? The timeline starts on 1. It goes from the year 1 BC straight to 1 AD. It skips the year 0 on the timeline. Foolishness, I tell you.
I did not know that. That's pretty neat.
Is it foolish? Because 0 is not a number. Does that work?
Well, you think about like you know, with the birthday thing, we're not 1 years old until we're one, until we go a complete cycle. So it's always like, I remember why I just turned like 40, and I'm actually now, I completed my 40th turn of the heavens. I say I'm 40 years old, but really I'm on my 41st turn of the heavens, you know? So it's interesting we count our age like that, but you're saying we just skipped the one. That's how the, I don't know, Japanese, somewhere out there count age, I think.
Okay. You know,
Yeah,
I
they
was
just
just
start with one.
okay. I want to also just kind of tether quickly onto what you were weaving, PK, about leap years. Anybody born on a leap year, if they're born after 6 p.m., their life length doesn't measure like everybody else's due to how we deal with the leap year. So the leap year becomes a
Oh, that
stumbling
applies
block.
to my daughter.
Oh yeah, buddy. It will. It will. It becomes a stumbling block because 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, It also becomes foolishness.
It's not just leap year. It's
God,
not
you're
just
just
leap
getting
year.
right to the you're hitting right at the heart of this tetractys of the whole thing.
Yeah, PK, explain it for us how it goes.
All right, let me try to break it down again. So pretty much I did calculations of one time because I wanted to see if my birthday stayed on the same day every year. And so I was born in the morning at like 9:30. And what I'm getting at is I want it, like, I could look back, you know, to the year I was born and see and get the degree of the sun on the ecliptic. Okay. And so that is the moment I was born, or that's what I'm going off of, when that sun gets back to that place on the ecliptic, a specific degree. So with leap year, how it works is it drifts, you know, ever so slightly. And then the fourth year, it gets corrected and it like goes back down like that. So you see, kind of what I'm showing is kind of what you see in Stellarium, but you go year by year and it's like, drift, 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 correct. Drift, 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 correct. And so what I was trying to see is how, if that drift would throw off my birthday to a new day, because you could see how that would obviously change the hours that the sun would get to that same place, but whatever. And what I came to was that if you were born after 6 p.m., like on any day, it doesn't just have to be a leap year, on any year, then then that drift would take you to being born past midnight. In other words, that drift would take you to a time that was past midnight when the sun got back to that same degree on the ecliptic, therefore technically making your birthday a new Gregorian calendar day.
For
That's
anybody
what I
in a
was saying.
year.
For anyone in a year, yeah.
Well, then that fits into the Urim and the Thummim of the Greeks, where if you're born in the light of day or the darkness of night, the black and the white stone, kind of also, as they consider summer babies one type and winter babies another type. That's interesting. I didn't know it was anybody on any year. So what is the thing about people who are born on a leap year? Something affects their whatever, their
No,
age or their.
I'd imagine it's the same as far as what I just was described, because it's just like a cycle.
Okay,
and so
let me
like,
see.
and so like, yeah, it goes back to that, but it all depends on where you start.
Okay, I think my equation, I'm glad we're sussing this out live, because my equation, I'm seeing how I misunderstood you 3 different ways, but I'm realizing that is because there is an equation that I'm still attached to. And I think it has to do with people born on the day, on the leap year, lose their day every leap year, or something about that people who are born on that one special window, they don't age like everybody else because we F with the time frame.
But really, in actuality, the sun moves at a kind of known calculated pace. It processes back through the ecliptic at a calculated rate. So even though you don't have that Gregorian calendar day every year, the sun does pass through that degree of the ecliptic, you know, so wouldn't it be hard really to figure out, you know, what day that is. I've never really thought about it enough to like figure that out. But
you know what? I think I got the recipe. I just figured out the recipe. On leap years, we add 1 day, right? 366 instead. Yeah. Okay. Any baby born on the added day, their birthday, the added day, it doesn't exist for the other years. So if you were born on the added day, I think they add it in February. They add 1 extra day in February. If you have a baby on that day, you're having a baby on the extra day that will not exist every year. And so your baby's birthday, if it happens on the day that we add 1 day to, that's a special baby. And their birth date record is some kind of off of the normal, whatever. They're born on a day out of time is kind of what it looks like. And so if you talk to them,
leaplings.
Is that what they call them?
Leaplings. Yes.
I didn't know that. Yeah. So that's the equation I was attached to, PK. I'm glad you're sussing out the full spectrum of what you were getting at, because I think that's what I was conflating.
It's interesting because they could go March 1st or February 28th on the other years. It kind of puts them in the middle of this equally infinitely distant above or below. It's weird. I want to circle us into talking about like the real gravy that I had on deck, and then we can go into wild tangents.
I got one more nugget on the leap year thing. I think that there's actually, I know that in the Bible, the elites, they talk about using their progeny as archery. They talk about a den of vipers is literally scientifically called a quiver. And so they think of their children as arrows that they're going to shoot for their agenda into the future beyond their lifetime. And so also, I think that you can plan your baby's birth date with incredible accuracy and gain the admiration of other wizards in the world. So I think there's actually an incentive to make your baby land on day number 366 to make them special. All right.
That's beautiful, dude. So real quick, that touches on what I want to talk about before, because Sophia,
the baby did not come on the day I aimed for. Just for the record.
Because there's this conflation about Sophia and or about wisdom and prudence and everything. And basically the archers are described more as Sophia, Sophis, what usually gets translated to wisdom, but actually could be cunning, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I want to get into that because there's a big like something going on here. But archers usually describe Sophos. Think of sophisticated, right? Or like in cunning. Yeah. All right, Chance. Infinite us up.
Okay. So infinity is something that you have to try to wrap your head around if you get into things like calculus and advanced mathematics. And what we're going to go at today is where that is now divorced from reality and has been for a really long time. So I'm going to do some screen shares. They're not like slides or anything fancy, but let's start with this. All right. So this was a really big topic in the 17th century, particularly with this guy, Pascal, and the two infinities. And he was famous for writing about mankind being positioned between the infinitely large and the infinitely small. He writing that compared to the universe, humans are infinitely small, but compared to a microscopic mite or bacteria or whatever, humans are infinitely large. So do you guys notice the fallacy here right out the bat? Like the incorrect use of language right out of the gate here?
Yep, it's a huge problem.
And what is it?
Well, if he said infinite, it's just that.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything.
You
can't define infinite. You can't define infinite. He is doing what Spinoza did and talking about infinite in kind. And that right there is a fallacy. You can't, at the moment that you box in infinity, it is not infinity.
That's right. That's exactly it. So compared to a microscopic dust mite or compared to the universe, humans are neither infinitely large or infinitely small, because there is a definite difference in size between at least the dust mite and the human. We don't know the size of the universe maybe, but just the fact that we're measuring this in numbers, that it's on a scale of number, there's the problem right out the gate. And this is the heart of the argument. And so to be precise with our language, we want to talk about things being either infinite or indefinite. That's where Rene Guenon in this book really centers the argument. Everything he talks about revolves around that. So I'm going to read a little bit from his just the first chapter of this book, because this is great. Perfect timing. Gnostic Academy. What's up, brother Marty? Nice super chat. Appreciate that. Very good. Okay. Proceeding in a manner inverse to that of profane science, and in according with the unchanging perspective of all traditional science, we must, before all else, set forth the principle that will allow us ultimately to resolve the difficulties to which the infinitesimal method has given rise. He's talking about calculus. Without letting ourselves be led astray by potentially interminable discussions, as indeed happens in the case of those modern philosophers and mathematicians who, by the very fact that they lack this principle, have never provided a satisfactory and definitive solution to these difficulties. This principle is the very idea of the infinite, understood in its only true sense, which is the purely metaphysical sense. And on this subject, moreover, we have only summarily to recall what we have already expressed more completely elsewhere, talking about other books. The infinite is properly that which has no limits, for finite is obviously synonymous with limited. One cannot then correctly apply this term to anything other than that which has absolutely no limits. That is to say, the universal all, which includes in itself all possibilities and consequently cannot be limited by anything in any way. The infinite, thus understood, is metaphysically and logically necessary. For not only does it not imply any contradiction, not enclosing within itself anything negative, but it is on the contrary, its negation that would be contradictory. Furthermore, there can obviously be only one infinite, for two supposedly distinct infinities would limit and therefore inevitably exclude one another. Consequently, every time the term infinite is used in any sense other than that which we have just mentioned, we can be assured a priori that this use is necessarily improper, for it amounts, in short, either to ignoring the metaphysical infinite altogether or to supposing another infinite alongside it. So, hopefully we're wrapping our mind around this. Okay. Basically, he's talking about in math, they have this expression, infinitum secundum quid, which is the idea of the infinite in a certain respect. And as soon as you bring that idea in, that's the Spinozan thing you're talking about, it is no longer infinite. And this is what happened with this period of time where scientific enlightenment, or whatever you want to call this phase of humanity, really seeking to divorce itself from anything spiritual or metaphysical or supernatural, which on one level I can get behind, and I'll explain why. But they're totally throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of the infinite, because the only thing that can possibly be infinite is the universal all, the all that is. You cannot have infinite in a certain respect. And that's exactly what they do in calculus, right? They have the infinitely large and the infinitely small, which this refers to in mathematics. Infinitely small refers to an infinitesimal, which is a quantity considered smaller than any finite number, yet not actually zero. Essentially a concept representing a vanishingly small value used primarily in calculus to calculate rates of change and slopes. In the smallest infinity, they call it Aleph zero, actually. So what we're talking about, like what is the smallest infinity? It's basically the idea that just like a number can be added plus one, plus one, plus one, plus one, ad infinitum. And that's what we've been told constitutes the idea of infinity, which guess what? It doesn't. That's not infinity. That's called indefinite. That means that it's something that's within the realm of the finite because it's measurable, right? It's got a unit attached to it, but it's not defined, as in it doesn't have an end or a terminus. So it's, when people say like a circle is an infinite line, it's not actually. It's an it's an indefinite line. So we're going to be like, this is, I know it's a lot to wrap your head around, but we have to be impeccable with our terminology here. Otherwise we don't know what we're talking about. And this idea of the smallest infinity, that you can take, say, 1/2, right? And then get 1/2 of 1/2, 1/4, 1/2 of 1/4, and just keep having and having forever. This is at the heart of Zeno's paradoxes that we're going to talk about. And that constitutes what they call in math the infinitely small. But this is now if we have infinity going in the negative and infinity going in the positive, now we've got two infinities. And that necessarily does not work. Like the infinity would need to be all that is. So it really doesn't work to have basically a big one and a little one. But this is what is taught in mainstream math. And it leads to crazy concepts, you know? I'll stop here for now, but.
Yeah, I want to invoke Ma'at with her stretched arms. Ma'at, she is often in Zoroastrian symbology. She's much like old Zarathustra flying around with the winged Vimana, you know, and he's in a circular center of that vehicle, and he's got a wing going this way and a wing going that way. Well, Ma'at in Egypt had the same damn thing. She's in the middle. She's got a wing going that way and a wing going the other way. Her symbol is the ostrich feather, but also her symbol is outstretched feathers, and she sits in the middle. And I think of the claim of infinite positive numbers are on the left side of the decimal, and the infinite negative numbers that we're talking about are on the right side of the decimal. And so the decimal is almost the zero or the vehicle or the Vimana that she or Zarathustra is writing in. And then the infinity goes in both directions equally like a mirror. And that's the claim. That's the claim mathematically. But I just wanted to give it its symbolic root in the egg that the Vimana is based in as well.
I actually think that this is also where we get the sort of Kabbalist ideas of or Gnostic ideas of like the God beyond God, and then a demiurge God, the one that actually builds the realm, versus the real infinity, right? And that the demiurge one isn't necessarily flawed or incomplete like relative to the actual infinite light or the infinite God. Because really, when you wrap your head around this, things like number, space, time, etc., that people are frequently applying the notion of the so-called infinite to are determined conditions. We're talking about something discrete, you know, even if it's space that goes on forever. Well, that's just space that we're talking about, or we're talking about numbers that go on forever. So my point being, by necessity, if infinity is the all, and that means that nothing can lie outside of it, the only thing outside of infinity is the impossible or non-existent, which, being pure nothing, cannot limit the infinity in any way. So it's kind of null. This comes back to our zero and infinite actually being like married together in truth. This means that God itself, or the infinite itself, the all itself, has nothing to do with number. Number is like below it. You know, number it contains number, but number, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with number, but it's not number. It's, you know what I mean? It's like when you have, it's this pleroma idea where it is so everything that it's not any of those one things solely.
Yep. this gets so into kind of what I've been thinking about, and I was tracking down the the term in the Bible Almighty, right? So when you look at the Greek, right, or the Hebrew, it's like Shaddai, or I forget which one, but one of those they usually translate to Almighty. But then it gets interesting when you look at the Greek, because and even not just the Bible Greek, because there is this word that was older, allegedly than the Bible. It was from one of them ancient ones, and it was like pan archos or something like that, and it meant basically all ruler, because archos, think hierarchy, right? That's spiritual. Archy, like archy is ruler, and so like archons, and so this pan is all, and so that even got translated into, I peeped over at the English, and it was like the all powerful gods, so whoever translated it did all powerful. And then, hey Cheney, and then basically you go then to the Bible, and Panarchos isn't in there. They went with Pantocrator, right? And that usually is what gets translated to Almighty. Now, what I'm getting at is that that's not, even both of those aren't all powerful or almighty, because powerful, like you were saying, Chance, powerful, track down the etymology of that, and it's about the ability to like do anything, right? That to be able to, that's power, and just etymology wise. And then so basically Pantocrator was similar to ruler, but had this like seizing aspect also, or like holding, so like all holding, all seizing. But it was interesting because they were both like all ruling sort of thing, and not about power. But then we get, we have this almighty, and it's like, well, shit, where did that come from and why? Because all ruling is not the same as all powerful. Anyway.
I got a quick question. I want to just check if I'm remembering this word correctly. Isn't an awl a type of drill? Is that right?
All. I don't know now.
I think that's the old form of a drill. And I just want to hold space because I see a great many words in our language have this vertiginous nature. And I know that you fellas are picking up what I'm laying down. And I think oftentimes a great many words in our language are...
Oh, you're talking about an all, like AWL.
That's it. Thank you. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, Booty's on it already. There you go, buddy.
That's it, Booty. Thank you, brother. Yeah.
Nice.
So I think that there are a great number of vertiginous words in our language that are kind of like this concept of like, oh, you don't have time to catch up with...
You mean like vortex words?
Vertiginous words.
Okay.
And from Plato's Republic, this is really hard to draw forward, but I'll just give you the Cliff Notes version. Is basically, it's actually in Aristophanes' The Clouds that I learned it the most, but I've seen it also in the Republic, that they talk about some topics become so circuitous and almost so many mental gymnastics just to have a meeting of the minds that people become bored, and they become, this is what they call the open yawn of a nodding judge. And when I say an open yawn of a nodding judge, I am also saying that they are putting your judgment to sleep. They're circumventing your discernment. And so the open yawn of a nodding judge is earned by vertiginous words. If you give them the sense that I can talk you in circles all day if you want me to, or we can just use this word all. Let's just use this word all so we don't have to talk about what it really means. Like, oh, yeah, okay,
wow.
let's do that.
Dude, what you're saying here is what I want to show later, but basically my whole beef with Plato is that, exactly that. And then second is that the English translations take it upon themselves to, after they circled around those words and figured out what they meant, this shit gets translated to something different. You really got to look, you really got to watch, because they'll say, you know, the beautiful is the fine, the good is the beautiful, the prudent is the wise. It gets, dude, it gets so freaking sloppy. And
And the
when you
only
start really looking at it, it's like, what's the point of having these big philosophical debates about what these words mean? And then the translators don't even stay consistent with their translations, dude.
That's
And then
right.
what you
That's why
have
I
is
put it down.
then you have centuries of people looking for a mythical sunken continent called Atlantis in the
Yeah.
Atlantic Ocean, when in the Timaeus, they never say the word Okeanos once. It's
There
a
you go.
Pelagos, which is an
Perfect
inland
example.
waterway. There is
Yes.
no
Perfect
there's
example.
zero mention of Atlantis being in the Atlantic Ocean yet. Now we have mountains upon mountains of literature and research and everything. Like,
we have a NATO organization based on it.
it's
The
ridiculous.
Atlantean Treaty. But PK, I want to say something. What you do when you call out these details, you remain circumspect. And when you remain circumspect, when you track down every detail of every word, you are becoming the Sufi. You become the center, and you do not get dizzied up. You don't get dizzied out. You're remaining circumspect. Another word that does this is the word all things circum. Let's just say that. All things circum are also spinning out your thoughts and telling you we could talk all night and not get anywhere. So I just want people to see that recipe, because I see it packed out a billion ways, and the word all is my favorite.
So I want to get in. I kind of think it's funny that you mentioned all, because I'm about to talk about a concept from Thomas Aquinas, whose teacher was Saint Albert the Great.
Damn. I want to mention the Archimedean screw. I think this all has a tether to the Archimedean screw, but I'm gonna just put that cliff note out.
Okay. So I'm going to read a little bit more from Guenon. All right. So let's see, where do I start here? As for the idea of a sort of terminating eternity, talking about the eternal, we can see in it only the product of a confusion between the notions of eternity and duration, which is absolutely unjustifiable with respect to metaphysics. This is the gravy. We readily grant that the time in which we pass our corporeal lives really is indefinite, which is in no way incompatible with its terminating at both ends, which is to say, in conformity with the traditional cyclic conception that it has both a beginning and an end. We also grant that there exist other modes of duration, such as that which the scholastics call avum or aum, the indefinitude of which is, if one may so express it, indefinitely greater than that of this time. But all these modes and all their possible extension are nonetheless only indefinite, since it is always a question of particular conditions of existence proper to this or that state, and precisely insofar as each is a kind of duration, which implies succession. Not one can be identified with or assimilated to eternity, with which it has no more connection than does the finite, whatever its mode, nor again with the true infinite. For the notion of a relative eternity has no more meaning than that of a relative infinite. So what this is talking about is improper eternity. This is like a theological concept that, is not going to be discussed in your churches, because they're just going to tell you, when you die, you go to heaven with God forever and ever. Amen. Eternity, right? But this concept is basically like the fact that there's a relative experience of the passage of time, or basically an individual existence that has a beginning, because, right, you would go into the eternity. So it has this experience terminates and then that experience begins, means that it's already ineligible for the concept of eternal, that experience. Isn't you guys following me here? We have this this is basically the Latin word avum is another word for, or alvum is like an age or aeon, which is one of those things that gets translated as everlasting time or eternity.
Yep.
But we're really missing the point.
It's
Where it's
ionic
talking
life.
about, I'll just read this.
Crazy.
Scholastic philosophy, the avum is a temporal mode of existence experienced by angels and saints in heaven. In some ways, it is a state that logically lies between the eternity or timelessness of God and the temporal experience of material beings. It is sometimes referred to as improper eternity. Because basically, if we can't have your cake and eat it too, if you want to be, if you want to be in this idea of like ascending to a higher state or a heaven, then it can't really operate. You from this non-eternal experience that has this indefinite but still beginning and end, it can't do that. It's illogical. So this idea gets like applied to heavenly bodies and things too, which appear to be changeless, but they may have kind of an age-based duration, right? This is possibly this type of logic is where we get the idea of world ages, of the bigger, macro durations of time. I just think this is interesting stuff. These theological cans of worms that open when you start really pondering the idea of infinity, because really at this point, by this logic, that the infinite is, and it's simple logic, the infinite is that which contains all, and it cannot be in any way defined or contained or really even attached to anything temporal or physical whatsoever, then that means we don't really have much to stand on in terms of making supernatural or metaphysical claims about our existence or God. And this is, I'm happy I found this, or PK shared this with me, because it's really good on terms of like the rhetoric level way of justifying what to me feels like a very important dismissal of supernaturalism for the most part. Because that's, I think, where so much of this religiosity goes wrong, is the miraculous and the supernatural stuff that divorces people's sense. It gives you that Baudrillardian. It's the beginning of the hyper reality that Baudrillard talks about. Like now it operates through media, where I mean, just look at the media right now. Half the country is living in a complete fantasy land where they believe that Orange Man Bad is now going to take away all the rights of women and, is going to be Hitler and things like that. And that's just because of media. I mean, they've literally supernaturalized this guy, but it begins way back with like the supernaturalism and mysticism in religions. And I'm not saying that there aren't things that are possible, like cities and powers and, experiences beyond what is average for people. I'm not saying that stuff is impossible, but it's the supernaturalism that is really, I think, at its root attached to these improper conceptions of infinity, where really we need to be talking about things being indefinite. Hopefully this all makes sense.
Yeah, buddy. I think something I think we're all experiencing, and we do very regularly, is we bump up against this stumbling block, this foolishness, and we sense that it's in a great many things, but it's all kind of going back to claims of the origin. And there's a formula. What did they say? Scientists will tell you that I can explain absolutely everything in the universe if you just let me start with one miracle. If you just give me permission to slip one thing that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever in the beginning, then I can explain everything scientifically with logic. And I sense we are constantly, when we're dealing with these infinities and these calculus that, or whatever, these paradigms, that we're constantly bumping up against that one ask, that one miracle, that one buy-in of the illogical, so that everything can make sense. And I think it's fascinating. I have a theory that the Zazun of the Hebrews, that the universe began with a sucking in, a tightening of the belt, holding of the breath, was the beginning. And then I think Spinoza came out, somewhere between Spinoza and Giordano Bruno, he comes out with this transgressive opposite theory of the beginning of all things. And Spinoza's chain of causality is a tether going all the way back to the opposite of what the Hebrews believed, a big bang going outward, an explosion or an exhale. And I think that there is, and he was sent into exile, and he has this transgressive theory. And I just want to postulate that, that makes two deviations, two camps. Oh, these people think that they have the chain of causality going back to a negative. And then everybody in the science camp, they're basing everything, their one miracle, their one gospel, their one foolishness, the one stone they need to roll away is actually an explosion going the opposite way. And so ideologically, we have two camps that just don't agree, but they both want you to believe that they know what it all goes back to. And then comes along our boy Robert Sapolsky with determinism. And he tells you that every chemical experience that you ever thought was a decision, every time you thought you had free will. No, Spinoza has the words that tether in a chain of causality going back to that one ask, that one buy. I want to also say, I think that buy-in, that one miracle that these different people want to have control over, it's a tithing, it's a tax, it's a votive offering.
PK?
Muted. It's so heady what you just read and what to, think about it. But I think it's hard. I think it's worth considering and thinking about because I think we're meant to, things should make sense. I don't know about, that we're so lost as a people due to just how we're grown up or raised and all that crap and a lot of education and, to take the logic back, I think, is kind of what needs to happen. And, because for the longest time, like these discussions, was up to the scientist, up to the priest or whoever. And it's like, it's about damn time that we go, hold on just a minute, explain what you mean and just stop, blindly following this stuff. So
yeah, and that's a good point too. Like taking the logic back, I think the most important part of it to take back in every part of life that we are currently accepting to have validity or be accurate or be important, it can seem overwhelming. And I think the reason why people have this tendency to defer to expertism is because at this point, whatever field of ology it is, has built such a large edifice of ideas and construction that it's like a maze, a labyrinth to navigate. And I think we need to just go back to the foundations of each thing, because it's like the question of philosophy, or cosmology. What ground are you standing on? That's what the whole Mark Gober episode I just did was about. It's about choosing your ground, or someone's going to choose your ground for you, because the fact of the matter is, especially with these things that are more mathematical, but really with any chains of reasoning that you have, you can be on a faulty ground, but you can have a decent chain of reasoning that's functional, that takes you all the way to nearly to heaven in the Tower of Babel metaphor. But it's incorrect, it's built on a falsehood, so everything else is going to be incorrect. So if we can just get back to the ground and challenge the ground, then we don't need the labyrinth anymore. We can start building our own structure.
Big ups, Chance. I just want to point out that the ziggurat of the Tower of Babel, very vertiginous. It's got that vertiginous, that spiral. And there's another, it was really fun in the chat a while back when our buddy Dylan, he asked me, "Hey, Gabe, what's the word of the day?" And I was like, "Vertiginous." And he's like, "Damn, that's a good word. Now it's living in infamy." Then he was like, "Is it vertiginous or vortiginous?" And I was like, "Yes." Yes. And then I followed up the next comment I left. There's some kind of insight in here that I'm still marveling at, is the correspondence between Potemkin and the word panopticon. A Potemkin is a false village or a false front, so everything looks hunky-dory because the king's in town and you got to look like everything's on the up and up. We have a Potemkin economy right now just for the sake of a facade. But then the word panopticon is not dissimilar. A panopticon is strangely the engineering of the panopticon concept is not dissimilar. It's a tower in the center of a prison so that it can see equally into all of the cells of the prisoners on the outer perimeter. And the guard in the tower may or may not be there. There's the Potemkin. And it's vortiginous because it's lifted up and inflated to something that may or may not even have impact. And everybody in the prison cells thinks that the tower can see into their privacy. So yeah, Potemkin, panopticon, isn't it fascinating? When I vortiginously spin these letters, I get structures that are not unlike one another. Chance, are you stalking the baby on the baby monitor? Oh, you're getting the whiteboard on, bro. Yeah, let's go. So, vertiginous is words that's
here we go.
Yep. Is a ridiculous amount of words that it's almost like generating words, essentially. Word, genus, making, but then, oh no, vertiginous is upward. Vortiginous is words, a great amount of words to the extent of spinning your brain.
I think the latter is a neologism, but I'll take it. There's Dylan. Bro.
Yeah, buddy. What's up? What's up?
What up? So
Dylan's a very high-ranking, great Whiteboard Brotherhood initiate. He is at a degree. I don't even know what the degree is.
He had his whiteboard a long time ago.
Okay,
so what you got, PK?
I got a pretty giant weave here about, and cut at any time. If you just want to share your whiteboard thing, do it. But if you could share my screen here.
We open up a new can of worms?
Well, it's related. In short, what it's about is the 4 cardinal virtues: wise, brave, sober, just. All right,
let's do it, because then I'll weave on some. I'll weave on some 4 stuff all after that. So yeah, let's do that. Bringing it up.
Okay. So looking at this and just kind of what I was talking about with Plato, and I would go as far as to say that the Bible seems to be almost as bad, as far as
it's worse because there's a religion made out of it.
Right. So as far as meaning goes and everything, and being, saying words and being consistent and meaning the same thing, right? Let me ask a few questions. And these are, you could call rhetorical, but I want you guys to answer.
And it's not the Bible that's at fault. It's the translators that are at fault.
Correct. And yeah. And whether it was done intentionally or not, it's a different story. So would you say that being prudent is the same as being wise?
No.
Okay. Would you say that being cunning or being skilled is the same as being prudent?
No.
No.
They're all completely different.
Would you say that's the same as being wise? No. So
no. And if you ask Socrates, wise, the only thing we can attribute wise to is God.
Yeah. And so I have what that Socrates, that famous Plato Socrates quote of like, I know that I know nothing. You know, wise man thought he was wise, but he's not wise, because only the wise know that that wise that he's using there is a cognate of Sophia. Okay, so that wise. Why this is important, I think, is because these words, Plato wrote how many dialogues, and a lot of them had to do with finding the nuance of these terms and what they mean. And so even I could say that there is something to this as far as just the circular nature of language and how there's multiple terms that can be used to describe the same or similar things. For
Let me
example,
give an example too of the
Okay.
language, just a really quick one.
Yep.
Because this occurred to me the other day. The word wise, in modern usage is basically applied to someone too who's like, intelligent, has mentally sharp, or has good principles, things like that. But the word wit is a very close meaning, and wit is WIT, wise is WIS. There's a great example of the sigma tau crossover that in the old Greek, ST, and T were used interchangeably at times, to the point where, word wise and the word wit mean the same thing. Wit. It's just a good example of the sigma tau swap.
But today though, I would say wit is closer to clever. And now that would be another
but
question.
There's similar,
Does
concepts
clever
that connotate intelligence.
mean wise? No. Right. And so there's nuance. And this is like one thing about language, that it's like, you could write the dialogues on this crap, right? Like, well, no, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're prudent that you're wise, but if you're wise, I guess that would necessitate that you are prudent. You know what I mean? So you can have these like philosophical discussions. My beef is that if you're going to have them and write them down, put them in holy books like the Bible. Why wouldn't you be consistent with your words? That's the big deal, that there's not consistency. And so the 4 cardinal virtues, they say, were kind of given by Plato, picked up by Bible, Saint so and so, whatever. You can kind of like track them down, but basically they are, in short, wisdom, courage or bravery, sobriety, or this would be the temperance or prudence, and then justice, right? And so the words here, to get kind of familiar with them, are this right here is a cognate of Sophia. Everyone's familiar with that word because of like Pistis Sophia and whatever. So Sophia usually gets translated as wisdom. This next word, brave, really it's like Andrea. So it makes me think of like Andre the Giant, or whatever, but like this, yes, androgen type thing. But this it means like man or manly, if you try, man or manly, like brave, courageous. Okay. This next word is sober, wise, or sober, prudency. And it is this double like O. Okay, so this is SO. It's basically like sophron. So there's a added row is basically the big deal here. And even there's this word where basically you just get into the phron. Phron is like mind. So this means like sober minded, right minded, or whatever. I got more slides I'll show, but just getting familiar. And this is DK, Daikiosune, justice. Okay. So let's look at this real quick. Right here is temperance or sobriety in Plato typically. See, remember how I just said the SO, the sigma O? This is without it. So this is just the phron of it. And this here is what is translated to wise in Matthew, or, therefore be as wise as serpents. All of a sudden, we're not wait a minute. I thought Sophia meant wise. Here, here wise is being put on this word, which is fron, has to do with fron. I might have another. Let me see real quick.
Does it sound
Go
like
to
phronesis?
This right here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's related to, they say this word friend, which is mind heart. This is where the heart, you know, the midriff, the heart gets connected with all this. Think with your heart, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But
you know,
this is translated to understanding as well.
okay.
But this wise man, see here, intelligent, prudent, sensible, wise. It, you know, okay, but it's like we just discussed, you know, this is
Interesting.
Fron. Go ahead.
They didn't use understanding in the other one, but
Oh, it's all it's completely like that, but it's kind of like there's multiple ways to say things. Like, I get what you mean, right? So there's this word for understanding that has to do with grasping. That, you know, there's this with seeing. I see what you mean, you know. And then there's the epistemology, you know, Google that. It's the study or theory of knowledge. And then there's this gnosis, you know. It's funny, I was watching Kim Wheeler last night on his live streams. He deletes them. Someone asked him something. He goes, people with, I've met, you know, he's kind of cocky. He's like, I've met many people with high IQs that were in a Mensa or whatever, but they're not wise. People often conflate epistemi with gnosis. They conflate knowledge with wisdom. He straight called gnosis wisdom. I messaged him. He read my thing. And he didn't respond. He just like gave this big exhale. I was like, okay, so if gnosis is wisdom, then what is Sophia? And he just read it. It was like, took a deep breath, like he didn't want to get into it. Because I think I may be asking, you know, I may be getting into a big philosophical thing, but again, it's a thing. It's a matter of being nuanced with your words. I understand there's multiple ways to say things. Go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, buddy. I'm not, what I'm about to say is not designed to find resolution. I'm not going to propose an answer. I'm just going to make a really good question, and to each their own about this. But I do believe in Plato's Republic, they're talking about the minds of men in their origin. And they say that there is a very cunning or clever. Now, the word clever is a clever ass word because it means both to cleave together and it means to pull apart. And what is fascinating is they say that in the minds of men, they have the principle of arithmos and the principle of phronesis. And that those are two different forms of knowing that I think we conflate to a great degree. And again, I'm not going to propose any resolution, but I think that you think of arithmos as mathematical, and then this phronesis is kind of calculating, or it's something different than mathematical. And so maybe what Ken Wheeler is saying is, yeah, a lot of people can do math, but do they do it wisely? Do they apply it? Do they command it actively? It's not just a mental thing that they're good at, that they get results, that they have a product as because of their action. And so wisdom is in the action aspect. It's the number one personality type. It's not internal, and it's not in your can.
Exactly.
It has results.
It's that clever cunningness. Yes, that implies action. I 100% agree with you. And I'm talking like etymology wise. That's right. What wise wisdom seems to mean. It seems to mean more of, I know how to apply the knowledge that I have. That is what wisdom.
Yeah, buddy.
It's what I gather.
Yeah, it's bringing it forth. You know, it's kind of like, oh, this looks good in the plans, but what are the results that these people get? They look good in paper, but what is the product?
Well, I think so what is important about this is, and I think PK's entire way of going about study is exactly this, is that you look at how a word is decided to be translated in other places and get the data of like how many times it's translated to mean this or that. And that's really the only provenance we have on what ancient languages meant, their words actually meant. So it's no matter what, it's kind of still a game of telephone or a guessing game. And your best bet is to then like next, and this is why it just takes kind of if you really are into this, you have to just continually look at it and continually study, is to look at other words that have the same root in it and how that's going to be used. So you're looking at this word phrenemos, which has all these different definitions. I'll bring it back up if you want to put that slide back up.
You want me to bring phrenemos back up?
Yeah. And phren, phi rho, eta nun, phren. That's a word that pertains to the mind or thinking usually, but there's also words like it's also related to breathing, like the word diaphragm. And now we're ending a word in a m instead of an n.
One. Yeah.
But that's because if I'm not mistaken, Greek words don't like to terminate with an n. They don't like to terminate that way. So now this word phren, when it's put in diaphragm, it has to terminate with a mu, because that's more their style. They would rather end a word on an m. So, well, what's your diaphragm? It's the main apparatus for breathing. And now here we have another connection amongst many, like spiritus, like anima, like, it goes on, all these different ruach, all these words that equate to spirit and to breath at the same time. And we're seeing that, okay, this word phren, like phrenemos, being used in the Bible verse of be ye as wise as serpents, it might be related more to idea of spirit. Like even the word diaphragm, dia means through, but it's also like dia, like God. So it's the God spirit, or it's the place your breath goes through, your diaphragm. So this level of context wouldn't have been lost on people that actually spoke Greek. They'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds like the word that relates to thinking, but it's also the word that kind of relates to my spirit and my breath. So when I see that word, or I hear that word, all of these things come into the mix that relate to what is being told to me here. But we just get wise, we're missing breath, we're missing spirit, we're missing mind, all of the above. So there's not just the definition and then the various possible translations that have been done, but then we look at the context of other words that use the root, and it opens up further possibility. And this is like rhetorically where stuff gets so tough, and why studying rhetoric more closely is probably worth everybody's time, both for communicating more effectively and your psychic self-defense. It's like in the Phaedrus, Socrates talks about the way that you want, like some of the ways, just a couple of the ways to categorize your rhetoric. One of them being the words that have meanings that are clear and distinct to everybody. Like the example he uses is the word iron. Iron, when we say iron, at least in Phaedrus, he's talking about the metal iron, and everyone kind of gets it. When we talk about a concept like love, now everyone's got a completely different idea of it in their head. So just that alone, like, are you communicating with words that have indefinite meaning, or are you talking about words that we all kind of can have a fixed target to? And love it or hate it, blessing and a curse with modern English, as magical as that can be, there's very few words that can just be boiled down to one meaning that everyone gets, and it's a physical object or concept that is across the board ubiquitously. That's what it is. We're almost, lost in the sauce of this indefinite, language. It's in our science. It's in our math. It's in our ways of communicating. And so, like the political circus that goes on right now, everyone's watching the same circus, and some people are like Hitler and other people are like Jesus. It's crazy, the range.
Chance, I want to just put a little footnote on your path. You remember in the Phaedrus, the most homoerotic part in the entire thing is when Socrates says, "Oh, I see you got something on your under your robe there, buddy. Well, what you got under your robe there, buddy?" And it's like the most overtly homoerotic moment in the entire Phaedrus. Keep that in mind if you are studying the biography of Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, his biography has a ritualistic reenactment of the Phaedrus packed into it, but only those in the know would see it. And that is that Thomas Aquinas, against his father's wishes, he went out and he emptied the bushel of food stores to feed poor people. And his dad caught on to him, and he goes and catches his son in the act of trying to give this loaf of bread to the poor people. And his father sees the loaf of bread sticking out from under his robe, just like Socrates onto Phaedrus. They are ritualistically reenacting these really uncomfortable, in fact, they're sublimated to the max because they're so gay. So and it's even worse because it's his own father. They double down on the creepiness because it's his father talking about the breadstick under his robe. So keep that in your whatever, on your bookshelf as you go through Thomas Aquinas's bio.
That's in
Thank
Thomas'
you.
bio. Oh my word.
And we'll probably see it in other people too. I'm just saying the Phaedrus is the root of it all.
You know where I
Yeah.
saw it was last night for entertainment value. We were watching, probably the most somehow unrecognized but completely homoerotic streamer on the internet, Steven Crowder, because he's doing like a big following the election live stream and all the other alt-right guys and it was ridiculous. Like every person that he brought on, he said something about, and it was always dudes, what a great ass they had. And then it got to the point where he has Alex Jones, they're crossing the streams, and he's complimenting Alex Jones, hitting on Alex Jones to the point where then Alex Jones takes off his shirt. He's like, he sits there with his shirt off, flexing his muscles and stuff. And I'm like, I thought the left was the gay ones. What is going on? And it's completely like missed by no one seems to care. It's really weird. But I guess I'm just as guilty because I had the stream on, but it's entertainment.
Sam Tripoli has a new term that it's going to get worn out in like 2 weeks. It won't last very long, but it's fun while it lasts. Sam Tripoli was on with Joe Rogan one episode before Chump. So Sam Tripoli's getting all this, whatever, strange limelight off gassing. But Sam, a couple days ago, he says, "I am deeply closeted for Trump." And I think this is going to be the new compliment. I'm deeply closeted for you. No longer
it's
do we say,
enadiadromia.
yeah, we don't even say full homo anymore. We just say, I'm going deeper in the closet in your name.
It's the enadiadromia, dude. It's happening. The left's becoming the right's becoming the left. We're getting there. Crossing the streams.
The Chiron of a syllogism. It's the Chiron of syllogism. Y'all should study the syllogism and study the what do they call it? The paragism, syllogism. These things are sexualized.
Syzygy, you mean the syzygy?
No, but that's a good one too. No,
Okay.
The syllogism is a logistical formula that you take two things on the top, two things on the bottom, and if the lines are good to go and they are referential and they make a chiron, if they make a chiron, then you have a good syllogism. But if you get bad syllogisms, I think it's called a paragism. It's a bad syllogism, a false syllogism. What is that called?
I'm gonna can we just leave that? Dylan,
Okay,
you still
okay.
here?
Shakespeare used to put syllogisms in his poetry, and it's good to know for logic.
Syllogisms.
And it sounds gay, so you won't look it up.
A logical argument that uses deductive reasoning to reach a conclusion based on two or more premises. Okay. An
And
example, all men are mortal, no gods are mortal, therefore no men are gods. That's a syllogism.
Is that the same as the ball is purple, therefore the ball is purple or the ball is not purple? Is that a syllogism?
If A is part of C and B is part of C, wait, if A is part of C, then B is part of C. Huh. Okay, this is the weeds for me. I want to talk about something else. I hope Tony's still here because this is
Ganon's got
the-
to tell me what to think about that one.
That's actually the worst graphic they could have made
I
to
know.
explain a syllogism. I think they're ruining logic right in front of our eyes, y'all. It's plain and simple. You just put 2 words on the top, 2 on the bottom. You don't make a circular graph like that. Anyway, yeah, let's move on.
Sure. Yeah, like no, that explanation, all men are mortal, no gods are mortal, therefore no men are gods. That's a valid syllogism.
Okay.
Simple.
Yeah,
Like
and there's a lot of booby
deductive and all
traps.
that.
Yeah, there's a lot of booby traps. People should study this on their own because this is how advertising gets one over on us all the time. You end up blaming yourself because you fell for a bad syllogism. This is
This also where we get lots of bad science too, is the
totally.
logical fallacy of, I can't remember what it is. But it's like if it rains, the grass is wet, but therefore the grass is wet, therefore it rained. No, it's like affirming the consequent or something. If A, then B.
That's a great one.
That's
all over the science.
How that applies to like allopathic infectious stuff. Yeah.
Right.
It's really good.
Okay. I want to talk about, this is like really good diffusion gravy. This is from the Principles of the Infinitesimal Calculus. I really liked this one right here. Okay. Let me read. Okay. Where should I start? I'm just going to read this whole paragraph from the beginning. Since the sequence of numbers in its entirety is not terminated by a given number, it follows that there is no number, however great, that could be identified with the indefinitely great in the sense just understood. And naturally, the same is true for the indefinitely small. One can only regard a number as practically indefinite if one... Okay, I'm sorry, I'm ruining this. This is starting from the middle. Let's just start with this connection, okay? Why does... You know what the Chinese language represents the word indefinite by? It's symbolic. They use the expression, have you heard of this? The 10,000 beings, for example. Like that means all beings.
Interesting.
They say the 10,000 beings means all beings, which is really basically the word 10,000, the symbol for 10,000 in Chinese also means an indefinite or an innumerable multitude. This is diffusion gravy.
So that's funny because before I always thought like the whole 10,000 things just meant kind of everything. But before this whole like really thinking about infinity, I thought that's, what it was. I wasn't distinguishing, thought 10,000 things just meant like literally all of it.
Well, dude, check. This is what I didn't know is that in Greek, the word for 10,000 is the same as the word for an indefinite amount, an indefinitude. Greek and Chinese, the word is, how do you say it? Morioi. It's like M-U-R-I-O-I.
Sounds a lot like the Moire.
Yeah. So he says, okay, so what Guenon says about this, why the word 10,000 in Greek means the same thing in indefinite or countless multitude as in Chinese. He says the true reason for this is the following. The number 10,000 is the 4th power of 10. Now, according to the formulation of the Tao Te Ching, 1 produced 2, 2 produced 3, 3 produced all numbers, which implies that 4 produced immediately after 3 is in a way equivalent to the whole set of numbers. And this because when one has the quaternary, by adding the first 4 numbers, one also has the denary. That means if you have 4, then you have 10, representing the complete numerical cycle. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. That's the numerical formula of the Pythagorean tetractys. One can further add that this representation of numerical indefinitude has its correspondence in the spatial order. It is common knowledge that raising a number from 1 degree to the next highest power represents in this order the addition of a dimension. Now, our space, having only 3 dimensions, its limits are transcended when one goes beyond the 3rd power, which in other words amounts to saying that elevation to the fourth power marks the very term of its indefinitude, since as soon as it is effected, one has thereby departed from space and passed and on to another order of possibilities.
Beyond the cube. Dude, Guenon is that's so good.
10,
He basically just said once you get beyond the cube.
10-4, big buddy. 10-4.
Oh my God, 10-4.
I understand.
So 4 to the 10th power. No, I'm trying to figure out what. Oh,
It's the whole John Dee's like
10 to the
hidden-
4th power.
Yeah.
10 to the 4th power.
the ternary and the ternary.
Is 10,000. Okay. 10
Man.
to the 4th power is 10,000. That's where he's getting this.
That's potent. What you just read is super potent, Chance. That was a
I
real
know.
gem that's going to unpack forever, if there is such a thing.
And
But
just the diffusion of the 10,000 things being a Greek and a Chinese concept when they're not supposed to have any connection to each other.
right.
But the connection might be by way of Egypt, because there is this inscription to Hermes at Heliopolis that says, I'm the one that becomes the two that becomes the 4, etc.
You know, one thing that I think a lot of people like, you know, what is the spider that ate the fly culturally? You know, there's no proof that they didn't have telephones and communication over distances way back then. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure a copper wire and a crystal will get you communicating from one tower to the next over distances a long time ago. But that was good. Also, Chance, let's think about the 14 with everything Marty Leeds is on about with the 14, 10-4 and the 14. And the 14 is replete through the gematria of biblical language.
Dude,
And
yeah.
that's,
Guess what?
yeah,
Oh, hold on.
yeah,
What's the 14th card?
art.
Temperance, baby.
That's right.
Ooh.
And what's temperance? It's that word phrenemos again.
my
They're
gosh.
translating that word as temperance.
Sophrosyne, right?
10-4.
Sobriety.
10,000. 10-4 is 10,000.
Yeah, and so sobriety. They'll say sobriety when they're talking about dudes sober. They're using that word. It's the same word, but the English people switch it up from being temperance to being sober. They use it synonymously, but it's the same word in Greek. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. In English, it gets so confusing if you're not looking at the Greek. It's weird. It's like almost, if I was translating that crap, you should at least, if you're going to change it, put a little note in there, be like, hey, this is that word, but I'm just using
Mhm.
prudence here. Like, tell people. It's so weird to me that doesn't happen.
Well, let's just do a little beta swap with the V. You know, what's sober now? Sober, savor, savior, temperance, sober.
Yeah, man. You know, I have a
Dude.
kind of, this is a bit of an esoteric nugget on the sobriety, and you would only know this if you've read the whatever, the Greeks, but in a certain light, words are intoxicating in a certain light. And so true sobriety, I've attained only briefly through fasting from words, abstaining from grammar, not getting hammered on grammar, and no longer entertaining the illusion of the shimmer of other people's sounds.
We're right
Well,
back to the Phaedrus. That
Right,
that words are medicine on the soul.
right. And so we're talking about this 10 to the power of 4 is something above and beyond the third dimension. We're into the fourth dimension. I just want to say we're outside of words. We're sober because words don't even apply to the reality anymore. And so the sobriety of this card also might have something to do with what many people call the ineffable. So yeah, maybe we're sober because words can't even give us a sense of that dimension, maybe.
I took off my Hunter S. Thompson glasses to prove my sobriety. I'm sober. Yeah. Wow.
14 is so fabulous. It's
Should we get
amazing how it
into?
pops
Should we
up.
talk about Zeno's paradoxes then? We've got like
Yes,
30
yes.
minutes left in the stream. Okay. Because this is what started me on the whole realm we're on here. Thinking about these. Okay. Zeno's paradox. You know what? I don't need to Wikipedia this. We don't need to go over all of, we don't need to go over all of the paradoxes. Let's just use one as an example because they're all kind of the same thing in different form, like slightly different forms. Here we go. This is the whiteboard of the great whiteboard brotherhood tonight.
Yeah, Daddy.
Okay.
Yeah, man. I called
look at the reflection of my red light, my red ring light. Very cool.
Oh, nice. I call Zeno's paradoxes the OG escape rooms. I think folks could go have some fun with them.
How do I get more in the middle? Okay. So I'm really new to whiteboards still. I'm just a first degree.
You're a near Earth object.
I'm a first degree initiate into the Great Whiteboard Brotherhood. Okay. So this is Achilles. He's the swiftest runner, or it could be Atalanta. She's the swiftest lady. Either way, starts with an A. All right. And this is a turtle. Very slow.
His name is Uguay.
All right. So this is the old tortoise and the hare. But the tortoise is going this way. And Achilles is swiftly running up to catch him. All right. So to catch the tortoise, Achilles needs to cover half the distance first. Before he can cross the whole distance, he has to cross half of the distance. But then after he's crossed half the distance, he needs to cross half again. And then he needs to cross half of that again. And then he needs to cross half of that again. And again. And again. And again. Okay. So if you guys are catching my drift, Zeno's paradoxes basically are talking about the whether or not space, time, matter, these things exist as a what's the word? I want to say discrete, but discontinuous integers. Like when they say discontinuous in mathematics, it's talking about how 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, that there's actually still a gap between 1 to 2 and a gap between 2 to 3, versus that there was just like a fluid. As soon as you cross over past 1, you're on 2, and then you're on 3. Like this is a legit mathematical question that the science or whatever has taken on to be that there is the continuum, actually, if I'm not mistaken, as in, there's basically, so we're like the modern calculus is kind of accepting Zeno's paradox, actually. Like I'll show you, here's a Scientific American article that quantum physics has reopened Zeno's paradoxes. And there's the tortoise. Like they actually, the quantum physics is predicated on this very type of deal. It's quanta, right? That means an amount. Basically that between any two integers, this is an infinity.
It's the amount of infinity. Okay.
Because you can you can divide a fraction between the two integers on forever and ever and ever. And they're calling that an infinity, but it's really it's indefinite. It's not infinite. They're mixing up indefinite and infinite. And there's so much philosophical, cosmological problems with that, to the point where people are chasing their tails in a giant hadron collider, smashing things and allegedly making smaller and smaller particles that allegedly will go on and divide eternally forever. And there's no end to the smallness. There's no.
Yeah, buddy.
The question is reality made up of pixels or waves or whatever, something like that?
Yeah, buddy. I want to mention Wolfgang Pauli is an acolyte of Carl Jung and also a cornerstone of the Hadron Collider. Isn't it fascinating? Yet again, just like Bernard Kastrup, we get psychology and physics. Well, psychology and physics. It's a fascinating meeting of the minds right there. These acolytes of Jung.
So I think it's actually going to be the most fun. I know I've been doing some reading, but I like to read. To just go ahead and I'll read Rene Guenon's chapter on the arguments of Zeno of Elea, Zeno's paradoxes, because it's only 3.5 pages, really just 3 pages, not that much. So I'll read that. You guys can jump in at any seemingly decent break point if you want to comment. That way you don't lose your weaves as I go through it. Okay. So this is late in the book. He's been just eviscerating all of this misconception around infinity and indefinite stuff mathematically for several chapters. The preceding considerations implicitly contain the solution to all problems of the sort raised by Zeno of Elea in his famous arguments against the possibility of motion. Because, let me pause, because that's what people interpret Zeno as saying, is that because Achilles can never reach the turtle because he keeps having to cross an infinitely dividing space that can be infinitely divided, then you never actually reach it, which means motion is an illusion. That's what people are inferring, which is, I guess,
such bad logic.
I guess that's one way to interpret it. Although it seems like that's a unlikely argument for Zeno to be making, since we experience termination of movement and movement. We reach our destination. We don't take infinitely halved steps. We just take normal steps.
Right. Just because you can theoretically divide a given, distance indefinitely does not somehow magically make that distance infinite. You see?
Right. So these are the arguments against, supposedly his arguments are against the possibility of motion, or at least in what appear to be such when one takes the arguments only as they are usually presented. In fact, one might well doubt whether this was really their significance. Indeed, it is rather unlikely that Zeno really intended to deny motion. What is more probable is that he merely wished to prove the incompatibility of the latter with the supposition, accepted notably by the atomists, of a real irreducible multiplicity existing in the nature of things. It was therefore originally against this very multiplicity so conceived by these arguments originally must have been directed. We do not say against all multiplicity, for it goes without saying that multiplicity also exists within its order, as does motion, which, moreover, like every kind of change, necessarily supposes multiplicity. But just as motion, by reason of its character of transitory and momentary modification, is not self-sufficient and would be purely illusory were it not linked to a higher principle transcendent with respect to it, such as the unmoved mover of Aristotle, so multiplicity would truly be non-existent were it to be reduced to itself alone, and did it not proceed from unity, as is reflected mathematically in the formation of the sequence of numbers, as we have seen. Okay, so I got to actually pause on that. This is a little side
that's
weave.
Big.
It's so big, all right?
That's
so what do we call, what is it that we call unity?
It's
oneness. Dude. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
What is one? One is a unit. The unit is one. I never tripped on that before, dude.
So, dude, listen, read that last part again, will you? About the unity being non-existent thing. Can you read that part again?
Okay. Multiplicity would truly be non-existent were it to be reduced to itself alone, and did it not proceed from unity, as is reflected mathematically in the formation of the sequence of numbers. Okay, what he's saying is the unit of measurement is one unit, oneness. So the only way that multiplicity can arise, the only way that you can have a number line is out of oneness, out of units, out of a unity. So if you try to separate it from the unity, then it can't exist.
Well, isn't he also saying the other thing too? If you take the multiplicity back into the unity, then it wouldn't exist. Isn't it saying that?
What is more, the supposition of an irreducible multiplicity inevitably excludes all real connections between the elements of things, and consequently all continuity as well. For the latter is only a particular case or special form of such connections. Let me read that again. The supposition of an irreducible multiplicity inevitably excludes all real connections between the elements of things. What he's saying is this Zeno's paradox that quantum physics believes in, their version of interpreting it, the atomist story, is that, you know, me and you slap hands, high five, but we never even touched each other. We never actually touched because there's an irreducible multiplicity that excludes all real connections between the elements of things. That's what he's getting at.
What page are you on?
This is page, I don't know if I have, it's chapter 23, if that helps. I think it's 135. Yeah.
Okay.
So he continues, he says, as we have already said, atomism necessarily implies the discontinuity of all things. Ultimately, motion really is incompatible with this discontinuity. And we shall see this is indeed what the arguments of Zeno show. Are we into this? Want me to keep going with this?
Yeah, this is super profound. You know, I've heard many brilliant minds talk about the problem of motion, you know, the applied science of motion. And I think Zeno was putting these problems together in a time that we didn't have concepts like velocity. I believe that the answer to Zeno's paradox is he's ignorant of velocity, and I think that's what remedies the paradigm or the paradox. And I think many other of his paradoxes, it's almost like he's giving us a problem, which is actually a demand for a type of language that resolves it. He's coming from
let me
a time.
hit you with a paradox, Gabe.
Okay.
What does Zeno mean? Xeno. Say foreigner. Foreign.
Outsider.
Freno. The word we've just been weaving on.
Right.
Freno, foreign. Same phonetic anagram.
Oh.
Super weird. Like, I don't know how this happens.
Stranger, right? Stranger. It's actually xenon is in the column, the noble gases column. I forget what number it is, but yeah, xenon is stranger, and it was a late arrival in the periodic elements. It's in
54.
the noble, but it's in the noble gases. Here we go with the noble lie, y'all. It's crazy. It's crazy. Noble means hidden.
Wow. PK, you want to move on this before I keep going? Because I could just go through the rest of this. He's going to get into the specifics.
Yeah, no, go ahead, because I'm rereading this. I heard something different, so I'm just rereading it.
What'd you hear different? Maybe I'm like, I mean, this is heady.
Yeah, I heard him saying, and I can't find that spot that I had you reread. I heard him talking about the
bottom of the first page of the
bottom
chapter.
of the first page. What is more the supposition that an irreducible multiplicity inevitably excludes all real connections between the elements of things. I thought it was right before that. So multiplicity, yeah. I don't know what I heard first off, and I could have it wrong, but I'd been thinking about the whole. I don't know if I've said it on here. I've said it before somewhere, but basically of the whole like idea of the one, and you know this whole like seemingly in religion and everyone like the goal is to get back to the one, or you know to become unified with the one, etc., right? Like that idea. I always thought that why would you want to do that, thinking about this in a way, because when according to like that ideology, usually the people also believe that everything came from the one. So essentially what I'm getting at is what everyone wants to do is get back to that thing that which everyone came from. But it's like, according to your own ideology, that oneness, when everything was there, when you were there, it divided into multiplicity, right? Like that's what it did. So why do you want to go back to what it was before it divided, because when it
He
was one
he
thing,
calls it
it
actually.
divided.
He talks about this. It's in biologically speaking, he describes it as extension, not multiplicity, or I'm sorry, not division. It's extension. So we might hear that word. In
And
the
isn't
coming
that interesting too? The whole I know, like, there's a divine, you get the vine and has like Bacchus-stein, roots or whatever. But even the divide thing is right in the word. The divine is the multiple, not the one. The divine is everything conscious. That if there was only one thing, it wouldn't know itself. It wouldn't be conscious. What makes it divine, D-I-V, it's in the word, is everything. That's all I gotta say.
The atomism is a number 4, the individual on the Enneagram. It is, I believe it's Aristophanes, the comedian, who tells the 4th eulogy, and he's talking about the dividing of man, and that we were once a big ball rolling around, and Zeus got pissed because they got full of themselves, and he came and sliced them like a boiled egg. And then he threatened, if you guys rise up again, I'll cut you one more time. You'll be hopping around on one leg, right? Don't come back because I can double these taxes. And he pats himself on the back. Pats himself on the back. He's like, this was a stroke of genius. This was his stroke of Genesis. The word individual, the number 4 personality type, the word individual is an anagram for dual dividend. Zeus was getting dual dividends out of every individual by cutting them in half. And he threatened to go for quadruple dividends, to cut you in again and get 4 times his returns when you come to pay taxes and acknowledge his power. So this individual in the story that Aristophanes tells is the foundation of atomism. It's the foundation of democracy. It's the foundation of comedy. This is the divine comedy right here. And we're buzzing on all these topics. Dual dividend is hiding in the word individual.
Well,
very clever.
But
very clever.
Individual means
I see what you did there.
An individual means not divided. So on the micro, we're talking about our self being unified, making the unconscious conscious, the returning to wholeness, or not even returning to it, but just being aware of it. Right. And then on the macro, it's like that whole, like, we're all one idea. Well, we all come from oneness. This is interesting because, I mean, I'm not telling you I know the answers, but I like what he goes on to say here, and using the argument of Zeno's paradoxes is helpful. So I do want to continue this. It's going to get a little heady. Listen closely. Take, for example, the following argument. An object in motion can never pass from one position to another, since between the two, there is always an infinity of other positions, however close, that must be successively traversed in the course of the motion. That's what I drew over here. And however much time is employed to traverse them, this infinity can never be exhausted. Assuredly, this is not a question of an infinity, as is usually said, for such would have no real meaning. But it is no less the case that in every interval one may take into account an indefinite number of positions for the moving object, and these cannot be exhausted in analytic fashion, which would involve each position being occupied one by one. But it is this very conception of motion that is an error, for it amounts, in short, to regarding the continuous as if it were composed of points, or of final, indivisible elements, like the notion according to which bodies are composed of atoms. And this would amount to saying that in reality there is no continuity, for whether it is a question of points or atoms, these final elements can only be discontinuous. Furthermore, it is true that without continuity, there would be no possible motion, and this is all that the argument actually proves. So let me try to translate this, all right? If there is this continuous, indefinite number between 1 inch and another inch, right? Or I'm 1 foot away from you, but there's an indefinite amount of divisible points between me and you, then that means each of those points is a definite point, which means that your very argument that there's a continuous gap between 1 and 2 is composed of discontinuous integers, but an indefinite amount of discontinuous integers. So the paradox of Zeno is he's pointing out that atomism doesn't work because if you're dividing things into, if you have a body that's an indefinite amount of particles, but you're saying that there's definite particles in there, then you can't have it both ways. It can't be continuous and discontinuous simultaneously. Otherwise, there would be no motion. There would be no time. There'd be no space.
Right.
That's what Guenon is. That's what I'm pulling out of Guenon. Am I reading this right?
I feel that you are. And
that's the paradox.
It's resonating in my mind with the concept of like, you can't use the word to define what it is. So like, when they use like the term subatomic, well, they're using the measure of the atom as to define a new measurement. But you kind of can't do that, right? Subatomic is a oxymoron. And we do that a million ways, I think. And I think that's parallel to what you just said, Chance. And this goes back to the syllogisms in fascinating ways, how the logic kind of breaks itself if you test it.
The same goes for the argument of the arrow that flies and is nonetheless immobile, since at each instant one sees only a single position, which amounts to supposing that each position can in itself be regarded as fixed and determined, and that the successive positions thus form a sort of discontinuous series. It is further necessary to observe that it is not in fact true that a moving object is ever viewed as if it occupied a fixed position, and that quite to the contrary, when the motion is fast enough, one will no longer see the moving object distinctly, but only the path of its continuous displacement. Thus, for example, if a flaming ember is whirled about rapidly, one will no longer see the form of the ember, but only a circle of fire. Moreover, whether one explains this by the persistence of retinal impressions, as physiologists do, or in any other way, it matters little, for it is no less obvious that in such cases one grasps the continuity of motion directly, as it were, and in a perceptible manner. What is more, when one uses the expression "at each instant" in formulating such arguments, one is implying that time is formed from a sequence of indivisible instants, to each of which there corresponds a determined position of the object. But in reality, temporal continuity is no more composed of instants than spatial continuity is of points. And as we have already pointed out, the possibility of motion presupposes the union, or rather the combination, of both temporal and spatial continuity.
Man, that's good stuff.
Yeah, he almost like flips it. He's almost like flipping atomism on his head. But it's kind of like the answer is the wave, I think, is what we're getting here.
Maybe, yeah. I want to put a pin right here on...
It's physicalism too. Like the whole belief of physicalism is that outside of your head, outside of consciousness, the universe exists out there independent of consciousness. But that's so silly because the only way we can know that something exists and that there is a universe is through consciousness. So consciousness is the window for it all. Right. So the fact that we see the thing as the poi, the spinning fireball, as a circle, tells us that there is a continuous motion. And there's definitely not, a point is a termination, an abstract termination. It is not, doesn't occupy any space. So there is no atom.
And if you were to, let's say where theoretically we want to freeze the poi in one slice of time, we're making a mistake by thinking we're freezing the poi. No, we are freezing all of time to even have that thought frame. We're not only freezing the poi, we're freezing everything to have the thought experiment.
And you can't actually do that.
You can't do that.
You can.
It's fiction.
And if you take a photograph, you're just painting a picture. That's not the poi. That's not the fire streaking.
It's art.
It's art. Yeah, that's something. Temperance is art.
Temperance is art, y'all. It's just art.
And what is it like to temper something too? I don't know.
I want to
temperament spell, baby.
Yeah,
We're coming back
buddy.
to that.
Even
Oh my
temperament
God.
Temper.
spell.
I think temper's prudent, right? Or is it wise? I forget.
Temper is number 5. Temperance, sobriety. It's the remedial virtue of greed. I wanted to put a pin on Alfred North Whitehead's theory of the present moment in this topic that you just read off of. I think there's a powerful thread here. I think Mark Goldberg Gober would have a lot to weave in with Alfred North Whitehead's concept of the present moment. And that is to say that, and I kind of believe that, we think of the present moment as like an infinitesimal a slice of time, right? What we were just talking about, freeze the universe, and that's a slice of time. But Whitehead has a different concept. He sees it extending backwards to some degree and even extending forward a little bit. He actually perceives the present moment as a duration of sorts. And I think that some people have a longer duration in the past. Some people have a longer backward shadow. Their Janus face, their Epimethean recall is more potent than their Promethean recall. But I think
It's called depression.
Yeah, that's right. Or conservatism. And then other people who are more active oriented, who are more planner, forward thinking, Promethean, they actually exist. They have more of a reality tunnel going forward in time, just a
That's
little
anxiety.
bit. There you go, buddy. There you go. Or liberalism. Isn't that funny how it magnifies like that?
I forgot to mention, guys, that even though Kyle was in the title, he had dad duties tonight.
Oh.
He had to do some stuff. And I we were just having so much fun. I forgot to mention it, but we love that guy, Kyle Denton. We'll see him, sooner or later. He's got a baby on the way.
Big love, brother Kyle.
He's the man. He's just the man. I bought some good stuff from Tippecanoe Herbs the other day. Made a resupply run. I know I promote this all the time, but I mean, how can I not? Let me show you what I'm about. I'm out of this right now, but I got more coming. Get this Updog stuff, guys, right here. Let me read it. Updog, Uplifting Focus Blend. This is my go-to pick-me-up to help me power through the day when I feel heavy after lunch. The mintiness is so nice to aiding in digestion, helping move heavy food. The yerba mate is slightly caffeinated, but not really intense like coffee. I reach a certain point in the day where the flavor of coffee isn't refreshing, but the flavor of this tea is. The linden is a pleasant, cooling anti-inflammatory that keeps my mind in a nice, focused place. I love this tea. What I'll say about it is everything that you said is true there. But you get to the point like you've been drinking coffee all morning, then you have lunch, and you feel like you need to pick me up because you're digesting and you got stuff to do. You go reach for more coffee, you're gonna be feeling it like, get these inflamed kidneys. Maybe your adrenals are a bit inflamed. While you switch to this Updog, you're gonna feel great. You're gonna feel clean. You're gonna feel clear. It's just refreshing. It's gonna hydrate you better than coffee does. I mean, if you're smart, you might just do only this. But peppermint, yerba mate, linden flower, nettle leaf, schisandra berry, cardamom. It's good stuff. I love this tea. Use the Interverse coupon code 10% off at Tippecanoe Herbs. Support Kyle and Serena and their growing family. They're about to have another little one. We had a really nice consult with them about, having an infant because they got a 2-year-old just the other day. Nice phone call, family to family. And I just really love those Dentons. So do me a favor, support the podcast, but also get yourself something good. Tippecanoe Herbs. That's my ad. I don't even feel guilt advertising them. That's good stuff right there.
Yeah, that's
you guys
great.
Got anything to add after my ad?
I have a couple things to add. I wanted to start off with this quote, but I'm going to say it now. And it's from J.G. Bennett. He's a J.G. Bennett. He's a Gurdjieff disciple. I think he's dead by now. But anyway, he kind of followed Gurdjieff, wrote books and stuff. He said this quote, and the more I think about it, the more I like it. But anyway, just let it sit with you. He said, knowing is something that can be communicated, but is not transferable. So knowledge is something that can be communicated, but isn't transferable. Then he said, understanding is something that can be transferred, but it cannot be communicated. And now what he means by transferred is transferred from like one experience to another. So think about like back in the day, there seemed to be so many polymaths or whatever. You know how if you have an understanding of maybe music or something, it's the whole as above, so below sort of idea. Once you understand something, then you can kind of take that understanding over to something else, right? And it applies. But here's the thing about that it can't be communicated is, I remember a little while back, everyone was asking you, Chance, for hey, can I get the chart of the letter switches and stuff? So, talking about language, can I get the P to the V or whatever?
The lockpick kit.
Yeah, the lockpick kit. And so that's the thing. People are asking for knowledge. Chance can only give you knowledge, because to come to the understanding of it is something that you have to do on your own. No one can do that for you, right? To come to a place of understanding. So
yeah, it's like, do you want the cheat sheet, or do you want to just have the, like, to me, I get understanding.
But the cheat sheet isn't
because
the answer all,
to me, like, an example of this is, I got a nephew who's learning to speak. He's 20 months old. And we're like, say poo poo. And he's like, boo boo. He switches the P with a B.
There you go.
I could go on, but like this 20-month-old, I'm going to see it with my own daughter as she grows up, is exemplifying the letter swaps. It's a natural thing that happens in our mouth, a lot of it. And some of it is an artifact of alphabets too. But, there's a lot of it that is just natural to how your tongue hits your mouth.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
that's understanding.
And that's understanding, right? It's something you get at some point. You play with it in your mind, you speak things out, you play with it, then you're like, oh crap, I see now how, that accent can make this sound like that or whatever. So anyway, that's understanding. The reason I bring this up, can you do share again real quick? The reason I bring this up is because talking about words and learning and everything, this is another quick example of the word that we've been on, which is the Fran word, the P8 PR, which we're saying means prudent, I think is what we went with. But let me show you this here. Like, okay, great. You got in Latin here in the Vulgate, prudence. Okay. But then you got Y's in KJV. Over here, 1 Corinthians, you get this word again, the Fran word. But down here in the Vulgate, it gets transferred to sensibus. Since this is more like, be a sensible mind, like sound mind or whatever. So tied into that same conjugate of the word. And over here is understanding. Now,
I think a good translation might be consciousness, honestly. Because if it's got this relation to breath, through the diaphragm,
it has a relation to the heart, not to breath. It's a relationship to the heart, not to what's the word, not to pneuma.
I've seen the etymologists related to the diaphragm, though, which that has a relation to breath, right?
I think
midriff, I think, is heart. I want to getting at more than breath. I could be wrong, but that's how I've always understood it. Go ahead, Gabe.
I want to invoke the rhythm section. I think this phren is the frenetics. I think because the heart is a drum, and also the diaphragm is a drum. It's a veil that you pull, like. But yeah, musically speaking, they are very correspondent in the rhythm section. Oh, and when I meditate, I have to actually get past my breath for a prolonged period, I have to really focus past my breath before I can find my heart behind it. And that is when I know I'm in the zone, when I can find my own heartbeat. And it takes a while to get through your breath.
Yeah, I think totally it's like all connected and all that good stuff. So this could have some connotation for sure with breath. Honestly, I don't know. I've just always went with the heart. But the reason I bring that up is because these words, I
It's like
think
heart mind. It's like this consciousness thing.
heart mind. It's like follow your heart, you know, that where that expression comes from. What my heart doesn't think. Well, I don't know. So the reason I bring this stuff up is because talk about nuance, right? Everyone's heard, I don't know if you guys heard this term before, but they say content is king, but context is God, right? Then, you know, I think, I don't know if I heard this from Gabe or someone else, but then there's a maybe better saying here that context is king, but nuance is God, meaning nuance is above context. What I'm getting at is these teachings, when we go and read the Plato and we go and read the Bible, okay, if it's been so conflated that these like teachings, they say, you know, Plato's philosophy is built on Plato, and then, you know, I won't even get into the significance of the Bible, but what I'm getting at is that these words, there's words like knowledge, understanding, all the four cardinal virtues, right? The bravery, the courage, the sobriety, the temperance, the wisdom, the cleverness, the cunningness, all these words. I think it's worth people's time to get familiar with what they mean or with what they are in another language. Like get familiar with the Greek and the Hebrew if you're going to go that route, because then you for yourself can see. And so when I'm reading Plato,
and just take your time, you know, like
and take your time.
If your study of a scripture or a text is like you just dig deep on one or two lines and that was your whole session, you're better off with that than you are blazing through and reading a whole chapter or the whole book.
And you totally miss the point because, you know,
it just goes in one ear and not the other.
It says sober when just before in the other book, you're reading about prudence and you don't connect the two or whatever, you know what I mean? So there's weird stuff like that. And I think you know, like I saw Dylan saying that sometimes there's not a one-to-one translation. I totally get that. So I don't think necessarily it's always just a bad translation.
That's why I think context, nuance.
That's its context. Yes, exactly. Right. That's why you look at it. And with the, so what I'm getting at here, you could see all these words here, even in this tree that's on, you know, these words are in the Bible, these Hebrew words. So like the da'ath or whatever is knowledge, you know? So it's just really, there's so many words that mean knowledge. It's like, is it episteme? Is it, you know, science, I think is like the Latin word, you know, but then there's all this other stuff and it's like understanding. You see how we do that? Well, epistemize basically like through standing, you know, so and then there's this whole grasping and stuff I already went over, but be not up here's understanding. Then you got wisdom. So see like the three, and here's beauty. So when you look at Plato, okay, Plato talks about the beautiful and the good. Sometimes they'll translate the beautiful as fine. They'll say, oh, it's the fine and the good, you know? And then I don't know, sometimes they may translate the opposite of good as ignoble. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of nuance here that you're going to miss unless we like, you know, kind of take this back and know what these words mean. Because now we're so blessed with having
fine is bringing us right back to fine's bringing us right back to finis, boundary, limit, finite.
Yeah, man.
Or being fined, you know, Gabe's whole taxing.
And that's so funny, yes, because it comes with beauty. And what is that? It's right in the middle. That's the key, right? That, you know, anything about Kabbalah, that's the sun, that's Jesus, you know,
That's tax day.
the tipper tax day. Yeah.
Just
and it is
kidding.
a beautiful day of the year.
So
Right there in the middle of spring.
we are super familiar to have this real quick. This website here, Perseus, you could search, just Google anything with the word Perseus after it. And then a lot of things people don't know is here you could type or hit the load Greek right here. And here you got all the words. Sometimes you can copy and paste this into a translator. I think sometimes it's good to find the word that until you get familiar. It's good because you could delete stuff out and find the word that you're looking for. But anyway, from here, you can click on any of these and it takes you right to the LSJ, and you get your definitions here. Another thing real quick is when you go to this Perseus website, if you type in the Greek here and hit search, it won't work. You got to go to this right here, hit all search options, type in the Greek here, or copy and paste the Greek here, and then hit go. And I'm missing the W, but anyway, you got to hit all search and then put it there. And there you go.
Yeah, buddy. PK, I just want to really compliment you, my friend. Circumspect.
Yeah, you're a great researcher.
Circumspect, y'all. Take notes from this guy. You said it. You said it just a minute ago. You said, consider what the words are. Don't just run off with what the words mean. The way you said that was perfect. You were so impeccable when you said that. Think of what the words are, not just what they mean in a linear fashion. Remain circumspect, because some words are packing so much luggage. Like PK, when we were on the live and we were talking about the Swift Tuttle, and everybody's like, oh yeah, Swift Tuttle. And I was like, oh yeah, this is Zeno's paradox right here. The Swift turtle. This is Zeno's paradox. So the Swift Tuttle thing, it unpacks like a babushka doll of meaning. And I can go on for an hour just talking about what a fascinating
That's
term.
a comet, by the way, the Swift Tuttle, just so people don't get lost on that.
And then I ended up and I did it quickly, but then I started weaving in the difference between the accelerationists and the Fabians. The Fabians want to do the slow kill, and the accelerationists want to pull the Band-Aid off. But these false dichotomies is the accelerationist the sheep that the Fabians wolf is wearing? You know what I mean? Are they kind of one and the same, this false dichotomy? So yeah, I just love that you said, think of what the words are. Don't get hung up on just what they mean. Don't be satisfied with what they mean. Think of what the words are. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's so fun. I think it unlocks so much. And yeah, it does seem a little daunting at first, but I know there's a lot of smart people in the comments that watch this show and everything. And I'm happy to share, go over the resources. I know people were asking about the one website which I gave out before, but anytime too, like if this Perseus thing is not the most user-friendly site at all.
Right.
It's pretty damn confusing.
They got Perseus is striking the that is the Hercules pose that he's in, and that's legit because that's the same bloodline. He's the descendant of Hercules, but it is a different constellation. It's very fascinating. They're 180 from each other. If you but before we leave, I got one little nugget, and it is going to tie into what you were saying, PK, in that little graphic I sent. Too. But no, you finish up.
I gotta relieve mom. I gotta do some dad duties. So
right on.
Be generous with the
super fast. All I was gonna say is Socrates when he talks about being wise, and he uses the word sophos. I might have said that already instead of anyway. Go ahead, Gabe. Let's let Chance go.
Yeah, buddy. So recently it dawned on me Socrates is kind of an anagram for satiric. And sure enough, I have learned that through Alan Moore, he made the most fascinating passing comment, and I'll never be done chewing on this, that some dark bards in the world can cast a black satire onto your life. And that's one of the worst spells. It's like, what is he talking about? And how is it obvious that nobody's even thinking of it? What is he talking over everybody's head? And I was like, your criminal record, your criminal
No,
record,
it's
your social credit score.
it's 4 years ago, people holding up signs that say I can't breathe while they're wearing a mask.
The dark satire. It is fascinating. Okay. But then PK, say the formula one more time. Knowledge is something that you cannot convey to somebody else.
It's so good. Yeah, you guys think
again.
about it. Okay, yep. So knowledge is something that can be communicated but not transferred. Understanding is something that can be transferred but not communicated. Just remember, you can't talk someone into understanding. You can't anything to someone for understanding. They have to get to it on their own. You can't communicate it.
Yes. So I will never be done studying the divided line, and I have learned quite a few things that I had wrong.
Crazy how much this fits into the question of the indefinite and infinite already.
It is crazy. So one thing I've said in the past, and if I led anybody astray, I want to correct that now. And I think I might have implied that Plato's Republic is anti-dogma, that there's no dogma in Plato's Republic. And I just want to kind of retract that a little bit. I think there is a sacred dogma here that I just can't knock down. I haven't been able to put this dogma into I haven't been able to deny it. It seems to be still here. It's a worthy foe, and that is to say that everyone should study Plato's divided line, and they do. They say that you can go forever in understanding, and it will never lead to knowledge. And that these categories are completely different from each other, and that it's actually like a paradigm leap. That it's almost like these are anatomical aspects of the psyche, and that and they are, yeah.
See, what you just said was opposite of what I said, and that's why I think the nuance is so important. Because is that Greek word that they were using understanding, or is it no? You know what I mean? That's why I'm saying, like, to even know what they're talking about, to even know what you're talking about. Does anyone know what wise means? Does anyone know? We don't.
And have we been given good translations of their essence? Have we been given really solid translations of their essence, or has something been lost in that? So yeah, I do. I like going back to the original word as best we can, because it seems to almost reflect somehow on the flaw of the terms we're using now. You know what I mean?
100%. That's what I was pointing out, or kind of hoped everyone would come to. That yes, it seems like if the priest class, if there was some deception going on, what better way to confuse the people than to confuse them on what understanding is and what knowledge is and what wisdom is.
Right.
You know, the foundations of stuff. It's like,
yeah. So one more week.
So big.
It's so big.
Like no one can define wise.
No, dude, it's such, yes, it's so hard.
It's so funny that we're at 2 hours. Chance has got to go, and the conversation is just getting juicy AF. I want to throw one more really fun nugget on the pyre because I think people will enjoy this. I have a theory. This is a belief. I have a belief, but it's not a dogma. Halley's Comet has a 76-year orbit. I know that the panspermia concept has deified Halley's Comet to a very difficult degree to appreciate. Halley's Comet is very sacred to the priest class, and last year was Halley's Comet turning around to come back. We are at the divided line. We are at the divided line for Halley's Comet. And the year that she turned around to come back, they inseminated our words with the red heifer sacrifice. And they did it 16 different ways from Friday through anagrams. We
And
packed-
Oliver Anthony.
and Oliver Anthony.
A terrible song. That was
Oh
all
my
over.
God. And then a year later, they flood the Richmond, north of Richmond, right on our heartstrings, right on the heartstrings. North Carolina is a anagram for Coloratri Nina. But anyway, so ritualistically, they spilled blood, our words, on the divided line for Halley's Comet to return. So I just want to put that in people's mind, because the measurement of this string, of this rope, of this orbit, whatever the heck it really is, it is sacred AF. And I just want it to be on people's radar, so these numerological significances are not floating in the subconscious, running psyops inside of psyops that are unrecognized. I want to put a name on that demon.
You know, one of the Latin words that gets translated into English to mean wise or prudent? Cordatus. Cordatus.
Dang, bro. It's
See,
like
how many of I could think of 3 others off the top of my head.
really.
Sophos.
Yeah, that gets translated to wise.
Sapiens.
Sapiens, 100%.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So just to prove my words about the red heifer sacrifice.
Consul.
Yeah. Red heifer sacrifice is a schizophrenic anagram out of the phrase safe, secure, effective. Safe, secure, effective is basically red heifer sacrifice repeated over and over for 2-3 years.
All right. Well, there's no real point to conclude. It's an indefinite weave. I really like doing it this way, guys. So you might see more great Whiteboard Brotherhood shows. I particularly, I just enjoy the day of spending my Wednesday reading a book that's kind of consumable in one shot and then thinking about it with you guys. I really like that. So
That was
we'll
awesome.
do it
Well,
again.
I think I found the Philosopher's Stone, or I found out what it is, but we'll save that for next time.
Wow, that's a good teaser. All right.
Placenta.
You know how it goes. Support the podcast with our affiliates. Mainly Tippecanoe Herbs is the one that I want you to do because it's so good for you. Biofield tunings are available with me. Still got a couple openings in November. Those are, as always, totally awesome. If you want to apply this pattern recognition to get in your own mind, body, spirit more aligned and coherent, let's do it. And other than that, we'll catch you guys on the flip. Much love. Thanks for being here, everyone. This is, if you're here, just want you to know, like, this ain't the easiest material. We're up here, like, admitting to not knowing shit. And that's maybe not the most popular way to go about presenting content. But, we're trying to be with God, with the nuance, with the context. And thanks for being there with us. We love you. See you next time.
Well said.
Much love, y'all.